Today's scripture readings are from Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. An expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But wanting to vindicate himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell in the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and took off, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came upon him. And when he saw him, he was moved with compassion. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, treating them with oil and wine. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him into an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." Which of these 3, do you think, was a neighbor of the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? He said, "The one who shows him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
This scripture passage has been an inspiration for the Chatham United Methodist Church and many, many other churches that have sent youth and adults to Rise up to northern Appalachia, upstate New York, where in some homes, when it rains into their living rooms or their bedrooms or their kitchens. And this passage is an important passage for we who are trying to follow Jesus. Jesus was asked, "Which commandment is the greatest?" He says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." And someone, perhaps looking for a loophole, asked, "Well, who is my neighbor?" i.e., how much do we really have to love? And Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan that many of us learned in Sunday school as children. And the true neighbor is the one who showed compassion, and Jesus says, "Go and do likewise." Going to Rise in upstate New York is loving our neighbor who lives 5 hours away. Our neighbor is everyone who is hurting, everyone who is vulnerable, everyone and everywhere that is broken, where the system doesn't work for them. Our teams are invited to give devotions before each meal, and we had teams this week from the Chatham United Methodist Church. We had 2 teams, Team 1 and Team 2. We were very original in our naming. There were teams from the Morristown Presbyterian Church and the Morris Plains Presbyterian Church, and each team before a meal was it the setup team that would give devotions? So there would be a team that would set up the dinner, not cook the dinner. Thank God we had Becky, who is making delicious food for us all week, and Donna, her sous chef. The teams would set the plates out, set the food out, clean up a little bit before the teams came in for dinner or breakfast, and then they would lead a devotion. One of our teams led this devotion, and it's a quote from Margaret Mead, who was an anthropologist. And Margaret Mead discovered in her study of fossils and bones of skeletons from long ago when civilization started. There was a shift from two-legged, upright people, creatures, creations of God, and for tens of thousands of years, they interacted with one another, but what created civilization, she noticed a femur bone that had been broken and healed. And she knew then that there was a shift in the creation, because to have a healed femur bone meant that people were caring for one another. They didn't just leave that one behind to die. They cared for that one who had broken a leg so that the leg could heal and that human being could continue on with their tribe. That was about 15,000 years old, that healed femur bone. That's how we measure civilization. How do we care for people who have broken a bone? How do we care for people who have broken something in their soul, in their spirit, in their community? And that's how civilizations are measured. We've been sending teams to Rise from this church for 43 years because something is broken or someone is broken, and we sense God is calling for us to care for our neighbor. So as we share stories, listen to us describe our neighbors. You'll hear some of their names and some of their landscape, and maybe some of their hurts or some of their challenges. I'm grateful for all of the stories that you will hear and all of the people who will share them.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Carl Andreasen. I'm part of Team 2 Chatham, who are sitting next to me here. Our job up at Rise was to replace a roof that was leaking, along with some gutters and other work around the site. The roof needed to be replaced because it was leaking so bad that underneath the ceiling, underneath the water was just pouring in. And in fact, the water was accumulating in the light fixture in the ceiling. So that was our main task, is the construction of a new roof. But when we showed up on the site on Monday morning, we were fortunate to meet our host, Wilma. She was out in her garden along with her aide because she had some trouble walking. And she was tending to her garden. And in particular that morning, she was paying attention to a rose bush that she had planted in memory of one of her relatives. And we got to talking with Wilma. She just opened up and kind of told us our whole life story right then and there. But I kept coming back with her to the property that she was on. Originally, it was about 400 acres and a farm. She was born in the house, moved away, came back, or grew up in the house, and then 48 years later came back to live in the house again. So there were a lot of trees and stuff around the site that were just really precious to her. One that stood out, which is maybe a sad story, but there was a big old pear tree that just this past year had died, probably due to the drought last year and then the year before of too much water. But it provided this like artistic silhouette along the edge of her property. So it was really kind of a fitting, almost a memory of what used to be there. And another thing that really kind of struck me was the plants around the house. She had these beautiful hostas that were just about ready to bloom. And it was kind of neat coming back to Chatham yesterday and noting that the hostas here are in full bloom. So you look at the different seasons up in New York State, they're about maybe 2 weeks behind us in springtime, if you will. But it was really great to get to know Wilma before we started our job, because it really made it, took it from being just working on the roof, replacing the roof, to recognizing that we were helping to make Wilma's life maybe a little easier. And hopefully, with what we did, she'll be able to sit on that porch telling her grandkids the same stories that she told us. So it just made the whole job so much easier knowing her before we started the work. So that's really all. I'm going to shift gears a little bit because it's kind of a funny story, if you will. So when we started first day of Rise, Pastor Jeff was leading the whole group, and he passed out these little erasers, reminding us that it's okay to make mistakes. And certainly we made our share of mistakes, cutting the wrong lengths of wood. I made a mistake of, with one shot I took out 2 roof shingles because I missed a nail. So we made lots of little mistakes. But along the way, I managed to cut my finger, which is a little mistake. This eraser kind of sums it up. But we opened up the medical kit, and there, right below the Band-Aids, was this giant eraser. Maybe telling us something, I'm not sure. So thank you for the opportunity to share my story with you.
Hey everyone, I'm Nathan Beeland. I'm also a part of Team 2. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about the job that we had to do in a little bit more detail. So when we arrived on Monday, we talked with Wilma for a majority of the day, but then we got started on repairing her door, which could barely slide, closed and open. So we got into the door and we started unscrewing the hinges on the door. And by the 4th hinge, we had to fully close the door. So that was fun. I got locked in there for about 5 or 10 minutes, something like that. Maybe a little hyperbole, but yeah. So then we kind of left the door for a bit and we got up on the roof and we started making the frame for the roof. So we put down a couple wood planks. Then by the end of Monday, it kind of just started pouring on us, so yeah, that was fun. Then come Tuesday, we finished the frame of wood planks. So you can imagine there's like one plane here and one plane here. That's kind of what the roof looked like. And then every 20 inches, we put a different beam. So for this frame, it would be this way, and for the other frame, we put beams this way, just made out of wood. So then we could screw on the metal later into the wood. Yeah. And then Wednesday, we took down some of the concrete that was on the back of the roof because it was really old. Had some asbestos, but, it wasn't that dangerous since, it was pretty wet. So yeah, we had to throw a couple garbage cans off the roof. Not garbage bags. That was pretty fun. It was pretty fun. Might have been a highlight. Yeah. And then we had to, we weren't very good at this. We got help from Rise staff. We got help from our guy Ken. But we had to screw in these metal things here that were shaped like this to flow down into the gutter so they didn't leak into the roof. And then from there, we kind of just started drilling in each of the metal pieces bit by bit. They overlapped. Made a couple of mistakes cutting, of course. You're always going to do that, as Carl said. The eraser. So after the roof was more or less finished, it was about Thursday or Friday, and we started fixing the gutters. So the gutter on one of the sides was pretty okay. We didn't have to take it out or anything. We just had to put in new screws, kind of clean it up a little bit. And we had to the gutter was like this, so we had to put a gutter part flowing this way so the water could flow down. Then the second gutter, we had to unscrew the screws because it was too far to one direction, and it wasn't almost diagonal a little bit in the sense that we wanted it to be. So we did that. We cleaned the gutter out, and we re-put it back up. Very thankful that we were easily able to do that. The wood wasn't rotten under or anything. And in between there, I was mostly on the roof, but I'm sure for the door, I remember we cut a little bit off the bottom so it could more easily fit. We got new hinges. Now it can more or less slide. And then we kind of fixed a window immediately to the right of the house. We put some wood under it to make it look better, and we screwed that in. Whole lot of drilling, that's for sure. I'll say that much. The finished product was pretty good, yeah. Not perfect, but hopefully, she won't have any leaks. We can hope.
Hi, I'm Mia Semioli, and I was also on Team 2. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about our homeowner, Wilma. She was 87 years old, and a lot of the time she would come out and sit with us and have conversations with us while we were working on her roof. She told us a lot about her life, and we learned that she had a pretty difficult life. She had a lot of physical issues, like she had both knees replaced, the hip replacement. She struggled with seizures a lot of her life, which prevented her from going to nursing school as well as driving. She also had cancer twice, and so she had a pretty difficult life, but she was a very outgoing, funny, and positive person when we were talking to her. And you could tell that she was very grateful for the life she was living. She found a lot of peace and happiness where she lived. She would talk about how she would sit outside and watch the animals, watch the birds, the deer. She had 3 pets that she loved as well. And she was also very grateful for us. She would offer us popsicles while we worked, so when it was really hot out. And at the end of the week, she also gave us 2 boxes of chocolates, which was very nice of her. And what was most special to me personally was at the end of the week, she brought out her calendar for the next year, and we all got to write down our birthdays with our addresses because she wanted to send us birthday cards, which was really sweet, and I think just shows how grateful she was. And
I'm Sienna Damons. I'm also from Team 2, and this was my first year at Rise. And when I was before I got there, I was kind of dreading it, in all honesty, because I didn't know what to expect. I just heard it would be 12 hours of labor every day or whatever. But the first day when we got there, after we'd gotten Nathan out of where he'd been stuck on the porch and got the door out of the slider, there were these 2 pieces of wood that we had to take out, and I think they were acting as the stop for the sliding door, and we had to take them out to fix some stuff, and there was this snake curled up on top of them. And from there I was like, okay, this is looking up because I love snakes. So I got to pick up the snake, and that was pretty fun. And then later, while I was on the roof, I looked out over the side, and on the windowsill there's these 2 other snakes curled up. And I didn't get to pick those ones up that day, but when we came back the next day, we found that there was this crack in the windowsill that they were living in, and they would just poke their heads out occasionally and just look out. So one of them came out fully. I got to pick that one up too. There were a couple frogs as well. And that on top of just like getting to bond with the people on my team and with Wilma, it really made the whole experience worth it, I think. Not just the snakes, obviously. And I don't know, I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. And yeah.
I didn't love the snakes as much as Sienna, but my name is Jen Semioli. I'm Mia's mom. So this was my first time going to Rise, and Mia's third and final time. So I was very grateful to have this trip with her. As a mom and a teacher, I was so impressed by these teenagers who give up a week of their summer vacation to sleep on a gym floor, get up at 6:30 in the morning, work all day in the sun, the rain. We were talking about like glimmers of hope, and I looked around the gym, and that was definitely like a glimmer of hope. What I wanted to share with you guys is that I speak for everyone, that we are so grateful for the financial donations for Rise. It's an expensive trip, and it wouldn't be possible without the donations from the congregation, so we are so thankful to you. You can always, when you give to the church, designate that you want it given to Rise. Also, after church today, we are having a maple syrup sale from a local maple syrup farmer that we got to know actually on our trip. So right outside here after church, if you would like to purchase some maple syrup, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Esther Van Dornik, and me and everybody to my left, we were on Team 1. So our job was also a leaky roof, but it was a little rough because we didn't know where the water was coming in. So the entire week basically consisted of putting up this one piece of metal, doing a rain test, so it didn't work, and until we finally found a solution on Thursday. So it was a lot of up and down the scaffolding, trying to think of new ways to solve it. And so we ended up taking up part of the old roof because there were 2 layers of roof. They just slapped one right on top of the other. And so we had to put in some flashing to direct the water not into his living room. And then the other part of our job was taking down the damaged ceiling in his living room and replacing that. And everything in there was pretty damaged from the water. He had a little bay window where the water was coming in, and when we took it all out, it was pretty rough up there. If you looked up enough, you could see daylight because there was just gaping holes, and the wood was so rotted that there was like soil and worms and roots. It was pretty impressive, actually. But we got to know our homeowner, Jerry, and his wife, Virginia, and dog, Betsy. And that was really nice. Throughout the week, he really liked watching us work. I think the leak and the rain caused him anxiety for so long, and I think us tearing down his ceiling also made him pretty anxious, but it was really nice at the end of the week to have him be so relieved and so grateful and so happy. I think that's what made it so worth it for us.
Hello everyone, my name is Josh Tavati, and I was on Team 1 for Chatham. This week on our Rise trip, we saw things that pictures could never do justice. Sunsets that lit up the sky in oranges and purples, mountains that stretched endlessly into the horizon. It felt like we were on top of the world. In those quiet moments surrounded by the beauty, we were reminded just how present God was with us. So a specific moment I remember was when we were driving back from an ice cream parlor called Sugar Daddy's. Earlier that day, we were very frustrated on our work site. Our solutions kept failing, and on top of that, we had no idea where the water was coming from. There was just we had no idea what was going on, and we were just so frustrated by that. But driving back, we saw this amazing, beautiful sunset. It lit up the sky, and it just stretched endlessly through the mountains. We got this overwhelming feeling of God just, surrounding us. And it reminded us what we were doing this for. Even through our frustration, we knew we were helping someone at the end of the day. Also, while we were driving back, Jeff taught us this wow, now, bow prayer. Wow meaning just, be in awe of God's creations. Now meaning being present in the moment. And bow meaning to give glory to God at the end of the day. So even in a poverty-stricken town where hope, seemed to be nowhere, we found beauty in God's creations, and that's what I loved about the trip.
Hi, I'm Abby Tavati, and I think Rise is an amazing opportunity to grow connections with people maybe you wouldn't usually talk to, whether that's our homeowners, the people on our team, and people from other churches. And I think it's such an amazing thing to grow a deeper connection with all of these people. One day of Rise that specifically stuck out to me was the last day when we were, it's called a compliment circle. Basically, we get into our groups and just say what we appreciate about each other. And I think that day was very emotional, and it's amazing. So when you're with each other for a week, you're bound to see a different side of people that you wouldn't usually see. And I think it's just so amazing that we got this opportunity to learn more about each other.
Good morning. My name is Michael Ferriello. This was my first Rise trip, and thank you for helping to make that happen. I want to share a little bit more about our homeowners. Married couple, 73 and I think 78 years old. Jerry was our prime contact, and in many ways our only contact. Virginia suffers from severe rheumatoid arthritis as well as some respiratory issues. So I only saw her one time for about 3 minutes in the kitchen. Otherwise, my understanding was that she was sleeping. The medication to relieve some of the pain knocks her for a loop, and her quality of life is probably pretty questionable. So we interacted with Jerry, and that started Sunday night when Jeff and I went to the job site with some Rise staff. It didn't take long for Jerry to share that this leak had caused him anxiety. It made him worry. That's what he shared. I've been worried about this. On Monday, when we returned for the 5 of us, he reiterated how much worry he had surrounding the leak. He expressed worry as to whether or not we'd be able to do the job. He expressed worry as to whether or not we were going to leave a huge hole in the roof. Jerry had a lot of worries. But he engaged us and then told us to get to work. He was very eager for us to get to work. It became clear a little bit later in the afternoon that Jerry didn't understand we were going to be back day after day after day after. I think he thought we were there for 1 day, which is a good thing that we weren't, because we could have never done what we did in 1 day. Our team persevered many setbacks. In my head, I dubbed us the Thomas Edison team, because we found 7 ways not to flash this roof leak. Over the course of the week, Jerry shared more and more of himself, which is kind of unusual in a guy. Our first day eating lunch, sitting in his lawn, he brought us all a bottle of water, which I found remarkably thoughtful and generous. I think it was mentioned that later in the week, he would start to sit. We had a trailer of tools with us with a side door that faced where we were working, and he would plop himself down in there for hours on end, just watching, interacting. And then the next day, he wasn't there at all. And he sought me out, and he explained that he couldn't sit in the trailer anymore because it made him too anxious. Later that afternoon, we were walking to a picnic table because we'd found a nicer lunch spot And he pulled up in his car and let us know that he was going out for a few errands. And he shared with me that he had to take a little medication that day because he takes medication for anxiety and depression. To a total stranger. And I was proud to return that and say, me too. 5 strangers in and out and around your house, moving your living room furniture, taking down your curtains that have probably been hanging in there for 35 years, finding worms. I mean, I don't think he knew, but worms in the ceiling of his home. And he was thankful and he was worried. So I hope that our work maybe relieved him of a little bit of that anxiety. If nothing else, his home is a lot drier.
I'm Jeff Marquet. Some of you have heard me tell this story. Welch's grape juice was invented by Dr. Welch in Vineland, New Jersey, and he was a very faithful Methodist layperson. He had a friend who was dealing with alcoholism, and his friend came to worship. They had Eucharist, the wine and the bread, and his friend, who was an alcoholic, tasted the alcohol and went on a binge, got drunk, ended up stumbling into a railroad track and was killed by a train. Dr. Welch said, we as Methodists need to figure this out. How can we have Eucharist, one of our 2 sacraments, baptism and Eucharist? How can we make this safer for people who are dealing with problems with alcohol, addictions? How can we make the table accessible? So Dr. Welch invented unfermented grape juice so that Eucharist, communion, could be more accessible to everyone. So on Sunday night, we celebrated Eucharist in the school where we were staying, and we celebrated communion in a cafeteria. It's probably the only time that cafeteria ever has communion served, but there's community that gathers around those tables all the time. When we were trying to fix the leak in the roof, as you know, water can go in anywhere on a roof and find its way to the lowest point, and it's very difficult to find. And we made probably 6 or 7 attempts to try and fix this leak. And after each attempt, Abby would climb up on the roof, to climb a ladder onto the roof with a hose, and would spray down the roof, and we would watch the water cascade over the bay window. And some of us would go inside and wait and look. And sometimes it would take 7 or 8 minutes for the water to find its way into the bay window and start leaking into the living room. And we would have to figure out another plan. There were some moments where we realized instead of Abby going up onto the roof, we could take a bottle, an empty bottle of grape juice, dip it into a bucket, and pour it in certain areas on the roof to see if it would seep into the living room. And finally, on the last attempt, it was engineering plan number 7, or was it number 8? 8B. All 5 of us went into the living room because there was a torrential downpour. And we watched, and we waited. And none of us wanted to say too quickly, "It's working." I think we waited about 10 minutes. Torrential rain. And there was no leak. And we were so grateful. Margaret Mead said this, the anthropologist who we reflected on earlier. She said this: never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. We could easily despair and say there's nothing we can do. The problems are too big. It's too much. But all we need is a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens to change the world. We changed Jerry's world, and Virginia's world, and Wilma's world. Whatever challenges you all face, you can make a difference. And we who are trying to follow Jesus may need to look for opportunities to move from this table where we celebrate communion with grape juice and gluten-free wafers, and to realize that that same movement needs to be taken out to people who are hurting, and to use the gifts of the Eucharist to move from sacrament to service. The sacrament is of no use unless it is brought out into the world to serve people who are in need. And God showed us that this week. We moved from sacrament to service with a small group of committed people. I sense we're all a small group of committed people who can make a difference in the world, and for that, I give God thanks.